Whoa, g'day guys, it's Sam here from Built Not Bought, and today we're taking a look at Dylan's D40. Alright, so this car has been a highly requested car. Basically, I put a post up on Facebook at the start of the year and everyone wanted to see this rig. So it's a pretty epic build. Without further ado, let's just get straight into it, starting with the outside. There's going to be a lot of stuff on this car, so hopefully, you know, we can get a real detailed look at it, but there's going to be a lot of stuff I'll probably miss, otherwise we'll be here all day. But yeah, let's get straight into it. Okay, so starting with the front end, pretty much everything's been custom made, and he was telling me that sort of it's all done on the cheap unless it's something that's sort of required for the full driving, like expensive suspension, things that matter basically. So with the aesthetic side of things, it's sort of just done to look good from home. Like these flares, just from the wreckers, and he's put in like 50mm spacer in there to sort of step it out. This whole bull bar has just been made at home as well. These spotties, just an eBay special. Couple of light bars also off the net, so there's one on the roof there, one on the front. There's a Smitty built winch in there, so it's a 10,000 pound winch with looks like Dyneema rope as well. Around the side, got the flare again. This snorkel is actually homemade as well. He built that in the backyard, and he's gone sort of that lobster back look, just to be a bit different. And also, you probably noticed on some of the more modern cars, like, you know, Range Rovers and Prados and that, they've got that sort of plastic grille at the top there with the snorkel. We sort of try to mimic that, but on the stainless design. You know, it's all about being different with this truck. So along the side, he's made his own sliders as well, and pretty much runs us towards the back. We'll have a look at the canopy next. Okay, so we're at the business end now, basically, the back end on the canopy. Sorry about the noise, there's a bit of construction on behind us, hopefully you can't hear that. But so Dylan's actually built this himself, and it was his first sort of project when it comes to like aluminium work. Gone a bit overkill with this. He was telling me it's sort of all 5mm tubing, thick wall. If you did it again, it'd go something lighter, but it's definitely going to be built strong. So he's gone sort of a half box because he's got dogs, so he needs that space in the back to use, you know, an area for the dogs. Also, you can chuck stuff in there, you know, your firewood and dirty gear and all that kind of stuff. But basically, a couple of holders on the back so you can have extra water. You can chuck fuel there if you need as well. Spare tyres on the back. There's a high lift jack down there as well. Coming around this side, Darcy rooftop tent on top there, and then the alley cab shadow on, so that is a full wrap around to the side as well. A lot of shade under that thing. This side is just sort of all recovery gear in that. So he sort of built all this frame down here, and then just got someone to press up all the doors. In this side of the canopy, this is sort of like the kitchen slash electrical side in a way. So 95 litre fridge freezer by Waco. There's actually a battery underneath the car there, so the second one is mounted down there, and it's managed by this C-Tech isolator there. So that runs all this sort of panel here, which is just basically all the lighting. There's lighting on the doors, there's lighting in the back there. He's actually wired up lighting to the tent as well, and there's a fan in there also. Then next to it's just a shelf to throw, you know, your camp chair. He's got a couple of step ladders here. And then, yeah, the fridge comes out on a slide. He's built this himself, you know, on the cheap. Just a few runners from Bunnings and some angle iron lying around. Don't know if I can open it fine. There we go, something like that. So it's a pretty big fridge freezer, but holds the weight. All right, run around the other side. This door here is just sort of a dirty gear door as well. Just a few spare oils and bits and pieces down there. This side's sort of mainly just storage. So got a few bits of my camera gear in here, but there's sort of drawers for cutlery. This is where the pots and pans live. Cooker up there, and nitrous bottle, a bit of a sneak peek of what's going on under the bonnet there. So I think we'll jump under there next and see what's pushing this puppy along. All right, so looking under the bonnet of this thing, basically it's sort of the standard D40 motor, but it has been pulled apart and sort of checked and rebuilt. You know, the crank's been ground to be true as well. And then sort of everything external he's put on there is done for the performance side of things. As I mentioned earlier, like, he spent the money where it counts. So it's a compound turbo setup, so there's 2 turbos there. And Dylan's actually built everything to do with like exhaust manifolds, intake manifolds. He's built this airbox as well. So it's all run through the way he wants. So both of the turbos are IHI, and they're both running within their own sort of mapped pressures. All right, so the big one's the atmospheric turbo, so that's 10 PSI, it's sort of pushing in that one. And the smaller one here is the second turbo, that's 17 PSI, but in combination through to the engine, it's actually ending up with about 42 pound into the motor. To handle that, he's pretty much upgraded the head studs to ARP. It's got 40% oversized injectors. The fuel pump's had a stroker shaft put into it, so it's actually got a longer stroke on the pistons. If you sort of know how these work with their mechanical sides, it's basically the standard pump but being stroked in a way to push more fuel through. The NOS that we mentioned in the back, there's a little butterfly solenoid in there to run into your intake there, so it's pretty much just a dry NOS system. There's a water methanol injection system there as well. He's still tweaking with that a bit, but it's set up at least. A copper brass radiator has also been put in here for cooling. Now when we're talking intercoolers as well, he's actually recently changed the way it's set up, and each turbo is intercooled individually. So out of that atmospheric turbo, the air runs back into a PWR intercooler and then back into the smaller turbo and runs into a secondary intercooler. Now he's got gauges inside, we'll get to that in a bit, but I was watching it on the way here, 30 degrees of air coming in, it heats up through the turbos, and there was about 30 degrees going back into the engine. So the way this intercooler is set up, it's pretty much causing no extra heat coming into that motor. So that was a pretty trick setup, I think. So with all this stuff, it's pushing out about 1300 Newton meters and 370 horsepower. So that is pretty insane for the 4-cylinder that it is. To handle that, it goes through pretty much the standard manual gearbox, but it's got a brass button NPC clutch to handle that torque. And then through the standard transfer case, and there's a little trick inside with the way he's set that up as well. I'll show you that in a sec. All right, inside, there's a whole lot going on here as well, of course. Starting with gauges, so he's got boost pressure, water temp, and oil pressure, critical engine diagnostic stuff there. He's also got his EGT gauge down here, I'll show you that as well. So there's a Heyman Reese towing controller here as well. A couple of switches floating around for different spotlights and things like that. Over here, so basically the whole engine's controlled by an ECU from ECU shop. So that's tucked up under the dash. There's a touch control here for changing the mapping, because you can have different tunes on there and switch between them as you need. It's got a rev controller here, sort of like a rev limiter thing in a way. Also got OBD2 sort of adapter, part of that ECU shop package, which goes through all your different temperatures and pressures and stuff like that. Ambient air temps in there, and then this gauge next to it's actually got your temperatures before and after the different intercoolers, so it will show you what's going into the engine and then what's coming out of that first turbo that I mentioned before. Switches down here for lockers, we'll get to in a sec when we talk about diffs. Switch for the compressor, GME UHF radio, a couple of holders he's adding here for bits and pieces. Now, as I mentioned before, something trick with the transfer case here. Normally these have an electronic switch button on the dash there, but everyone knows they're crap. They just break, they're electronic. So what he's done is just shoved a big post straight through the center console here, down to your transfer case. It uses a socket to switch it into low range. So it's basically mechanically driven now, so it's a lot more reliable. He put it in there to sort of just test it, see if it worked, and 3 years later, hasn't skipped a beat. So it was pretty cool to see that thing. We'll have a look at pretty much suspension. It's the last thing on this. There's a lot going on underneath this truck. So let's go and have a look at that. All right, so last thing we're looking at is basically what's underneath this thing. Essentially, it's sitting on 2 80 series diffs. So it's been converted to that solid axle setup. The front diff's actually been flipped over to allow the pumpkin to sit on the right side for the transfer case and the drive shaft to go through. The front springs are actually out of a 79 series because they're a smaller diameter to fit these tyres and the way that that's set up on the front there. It's all Fox shocks. It's actually got Profender hydraulic bump stops on there. Those shocks are all remote reservoir, the 2.0s. It's got a Fox steering dampener. It's got limiting straps in there. There's also a Bud's Custom Panhard with a Heim joint on the end. And the whole diffs have been braced. Both of them, front and rear, have ARB air lockers. It's a 4-inch kit essentially for like an 80 series, but as a Navara, it's probably sitting at about 7 inches over standard. Okay, so yeah, the back end, basically 80 series diff again with the ARB air locker. Now he's actually done a triangulated 4-link on the rear, so you guys probably know by now how they work. It makes the diff go up and down without any sideward movement, so there's no panhard involved. So Ironhide has done sort of the setup and all the welding in place for setting that up. It's been mod plated and engineered, so that's all done properly. He's actually got a Curry anti-roll bar, so that's sort of an American-made torsion setup for the sway bar. There's no sway bar on the front at the moment, but he's got this sort of you know, custom made to suit this back end on this truck. There's 12-inch Fox shocks on the back. He's actually gone the Fox hydraulic bump stops in the rear on this one. The wheels, they're actually a 37-inch tyre with a 17-inch Method Racing beadlock rim. So like the size of this truck, if they don't look like 37s, but they are, which is really good for that, you know, off-road application. Tails over the top end there to dump out the side. Now that goes over that cross member, and because of the diff conversion, he's made a tower brace there for the coils to sit on. The rear coils are actually an 80 series, so there's 79 coils in the front, 80 series in the rear. I guess the last thing is to see how it drives and then hit the challenges. All right, let's take this Navara for a test drive. How many people have driven this car before? Not many?
Andrew does, he likes driving it.
Oh, that's cool. Alright, on-off switch on the clutch. It's not too bad, I'm used to that. See, mine's got the twin plate ceramic clutch, so you can't really ride these too much. Man, this has got to be the biggest Navara I've ever been in. It almost feels like I'm in an 80 series or something, to be honest. Like, it does have that wide stance. I've driven a couple of Navaras before, but they're just, you know, street queens. This thing is built for the tracks, that's for sure. I feel that the steering's, you know, a little bit heavier than a standard one would be because of the size of the tyres, I'm sure. I feel once that boost sort of comes on, it's definitely got some torque there. From about 2,000 RPM, I can feel it pull. It's interesting, the way it pulls, it's sort of like a real even curve. Like, it's not a super aggressive, hard hit with the power. It's kind of like a steady pull the whole way through that rev range. All right, I think it's time to hand the wheel back over to Dylan for his challenges. Super impressed with the way things drive. I couldn't own a Navara over a Patrol, but for a Navara, very impressed with how it goes. All right, Dylan, so it's time for the challenges. Basically, 4 challenges, which is power in a way, which is your 100-meter sprint, and then there's the suspension test, so that's sort of the comfort in the ride, economy, and flex. So starting off with the 100-meter sprint, pretty much step out 100 meters, and then once I drop the hammer, you just hit the loud pedal, and we see what she does. So would you be feeling confident about that?
I'll see how we go.
It's got a bit of power, man. It's one of the sort of most powered ones that I've done at the moment. So
yeah, I'll see what
high
happens.
hopes. All right, let's do it.
She's pretty heavy. See how she goes.
He's taking a bit off there, so 7:13. That's up there. I'm not sure, that might have topped the charts, I got a feeling.
Well,
7:13.
Right, I've got no more excuses now,
yeah. So all the right things are selected. Got the lockers, second gear takeoff. Happy days.
That was first gear that time.
Was it?
Yeah.
Jeez, she jumped off the line. I reckon we may have a new top of the charts with that one. 7:13. I have to see. All right, next challenge is the comfort challenge. So we've got to find a bit of terrain, get the water on the bonnet, and hit that one. All right, time for challenge number 2. So we've done the sprint, now we're going to do the suspension comfort challenge. So 80 series diffs in this thing.
Yeah.
So it should ride pretty good, a lot nicer than sort of the standard Navara. She's got a bit of lift though. See how the terrain is, and sort of hope that we can pick a line that's not going to be too extreme on that. So basically all you got to do is get up to 50 kilometers an hour, then brake again how you like. You can brake hard, you can brake soft, come to a stop, and we see how much water comes out the top. So, you know,
probably empty, but there we go.
See how we go with that, eh? All right, let's do it.
Ready? Oh yeah, got starting foot already.
All right, well, what do you reckon's left in it? What percentage? Probably like...
Oh, that's at least 99%.
Listen to it. I call that about 70, yeah, 70%. No, 70% left in that. We saw him come past and you just kept going for a bit longer, but I think what came out had already sort of fallen out at that point. But all right, 70%. Last challenge really is just flex ramp and economy. All right, it's that time again for the flex ramp challenge. Obviously we're in Queensland again for this one, so we've got Queensland ramp, the big one. So we'll see what this does. You know, it's got the 80 series diffs in there, no sway bar on the front, 37, so it should be pretty sweet with its flex, I reckon. That's it, you're off the ground. All right, so as usual, straight from the hub. $690 690. So that it's not the most flexible we've ever had, but it's up there. 690. All right, first part of the economy challenge. We've rocked up the servo. Interesting little fact: he's never actually filled up this tank to the top before. Is that how many liters? 115. It's 115 litre custom-made tank. So a first for everything, right? All right, we're back at the servo after a day of wheeling. Of course, there's mud all over the thing. See how much fuel it's used, work out this economy. Is that it, you reckon?
No.
Just clicking. 5.8. The 25 litres, and we reckon add 20. We're gonna add 20 to that 113 because it didn't start at the beginning. So we'll call it 125 k's maybe. So it's 20 litres per 100. 20 litres per 100, efficient he reckons. Does that sound about right though for what we're doing today? Yeah, right. Had the foot down a bit, so there we are, 20 litres per 100.
Looking at the results for the challenges, I thought he had it on this one, but coming in second place with a 713, keeping in mind that Jeremy's Hilux was an automatic. Not a great result on the comfort challenge due to the tough terrain, but the result here was made up on the flex ramp challenge, coming in second place. And finally slotting in the middle somewhere with 20 litres per 100 in the economy challenge. So make sure guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. There'll be plenty more rig rundowns to come.
I've just spent 3 months doing engine upgrades on my motor here, and I've been told I'm not allowed to turn the key until you press subscribe. Please press subscribe.